I mean, we were always about the community, it's never, we're not doing it because we're grand explorers and, we're really tough and we know what we're doing. No, we're total bumbling idiots half the time. And we're just lucky that, the people that we meet along the way are the ones, that kind of, give us the ability to do these kinds of trips. And of course, you have different people who have different skill sets, and some people can cook, some people can clean, some people have the ability to fix cars, all kinds of different stuff. And so the community aspect of it was always really important to us. The community is what kind of allows for us to be able to afford and be able to get away with doing such ridiculous stuff.
That is today's guest, Joel Chevalier, and community is really at the heart of everything that he does and all of his travel adventures. He is the founder of Global Convoy. I encourage you to check him out at globalconvoy.com. This global community of travelers all started with 3 friends. They met up, they decided to drive a full loop of planet Earth in a year, and they were doing it in a car that cost around $100 US. Now, they had no idea what they were doing, but they ended up actually completing the journey over 10 different vehicles, and 100 awesome people later, they made it. And their latest adventure was driving in a big old yellow American school bus down the entire Pan American Highway from Prudhoe Bay, Alaska to Ushuaia, Argentina. And of course, along the way in this conversation, you're going to hear a lot of different stories from their trips on the road. We talk about the power of community and how he kind of manages that and how we can harness community to see more of the world. And for you, that might not necessarily mean strangers from the internet. That might mean, family or getting friends together. There are a lot of lessons to pull out here. We hit on a bunch of other themes, including DIY adventure and really diving in and figuring things out as you go instead of pre-planning. So there might be some mindset shifts coming out of this one. How to make travel sustainable. Some of Joel's favorite hidden gem destinations, of course, some of the big lessons learned through these journeys, and so much more. It's all coming at you right now in this episode. So buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey there, it's Jason with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. This is a fun one, and one of those ones I think that, although this style of travel, meeting up with people you don't even know and going on these crazy adventures, is not necessarily for everybody, I found that there was a lot to learn from this experience, hearing about these experiences in this conversation. So hope you enjoy it. Stick around on the back end if you'd like. I'm going to give a shout out to a community member who has 8 boots on the ground. You'll hear what that's all about. Plus, I'm going to leave you with a quote to wrap this one up. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up yet, zerototravel.com/newsletter. We have a free newsletter, goes out once a week. Would love for you to join the community there. Now, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Joel, and I will see you on the other side, my friend. Cheers. Pero yo sé bien que no puedes vivir sin mí. Ya intentamos olvidarnos, pero no resulta. Let me just say, formally, Joel, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
Thank you very much, man. It's great to be here.
It's funny because my associate producer, Caitlin, I guess you met her in person because you're in Bulgaria, right? I'm judging by the decor I see behind me.
We're Bansko, the beautiful mountain town for remote workers everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. She's like, oh, you got to talk to this guy, Joel. Like, he just finished driving a school bus down the whole Pan American Highway. And I was like, yep, sign me up. I don't even need to hear anymore. I got to say, like, on the YouTube channel, by the way, we'll link up to all this, globalconvoy.com. And I've got the YouTube channel and all the links there. But you guys have such a great trailer for the last documentary you did. I mean, people should go watch it. We'll link to it, but just to give people an idea, like you guys have this sort of DIY vibe and you're a bit poking fun at like people that are taking themselves too seriously on YouTube. So like somebody will come up and you'll be like this person, and under their picture, it's like cinematographer. And then you cross it out and it's just like they own an iPhone, like, this idea of sort of just like jumping in and we don't know what we're doing and we're just going to totally be honest about that. I was reading, I know you guys have podcast before, and one of the things you said in the description was we're going to simply jump into it and then learn and improve as we go. This isn't everybody's inclination to just like, it could be travel or other things to kind of just jump in and figure it out. And we can kind of talk about where all this started with the loop of planet Earth you did in the cheap cars and everything. But yeah, has that always been your way?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of how we got started. So basically, there's myself, my fiance Becca, and then Max, who's our partner, and we all kind of convolutedly got together to do this round the world trip along with a ton of other people. Basically, we were all just in the right place at the right time. I just happened to be backpacking through Europe, and I met a Portuguese guy at a bar in Amsterdam, and and then Max and Becca had kind of known each other from high school essentially, but had lost contact. And then suddenly Max kind of put out the feelers, coming up with this idea, which was basically they wanted to buy a car for as cheap as possible and see how far they could drive it. And she was like, "I'm in." So they bought our car that we drove around in together for a grand total of £75, so just under $100. And that was the car that we ad hoc went around the world with. And at the time we had no idea what we were doing. I mean, I didn't even know that you could drive to a lot of the places that we did. It was my first experience getting a Russian visa, which was weird at the time. But we just made it up as we went. And when we had breakdowns, which of course we had many breakdowns that came out through the time, we just kind of handled it as and when and sorted it out. Luckily for us, unknown to us as well, when we did have breakdowns, they were really cheap because we had really cheap shitty cars, and they had parts that they could replace, and we didn't care too much about how it looked. It was more just we needed it to function, and so a lot of Central Asian mechanics and Central American and South American mechanics were very happy to, when they would look at us and be like, "Okay, well, we have to cut this off and completely replace it." We're like, "Yeah, go. Yeah, that's great." And one of my favorite videos, I think, is when we were in Russia, we really dented a tire and it just was completely ruined. And so we asked the guy if he could fix it, and he was like, "Yeah, sure." And he just takes a hammer and just hammers it back into place, literally, and it worked fine. I mean, it made it all the way around the world after that. So just shows a little bit of ingenuity and some
and a hammer.
And a hammer, yeah, exactly. Who says brute force doesn't fix anything? So.
That's the Fonzie fix. People won't get that reference unless you go way back to Happy Days. But there was the guy Fonzie, and he used to fix the jukebox by just like slamming his hand on it. I've come across mechanics like that where they're just these. You'll probably never hear about them. They're not on the internet or anything, but they're like these secret geniuses. They just know
definitely.
how to. Everything works. Like if they had gone to school for electrical engineering or whatever, they probably would have graduated at the top of their class. I just love meeting people like that because it's just like this talent.
I think some of the best advice I'd gotten with vehicles, there was a guy who's like, whatever you ask a mechanic or you ask anybody about vehicles, you're going to get one of two answers. You're going to get the mechanic's answer, which is, "Oh yeah, you should replace it and that'll be safe and that'll be better." He's like, and then you'll get the machinist's answer, which is kind of like, "Okay, well, you just kind of run it until it's smooth." And the number one thing with doing the round the world trip was we absolutely couldn't have done it on our own. We had to completely and totally rely on other people. And because we kind of just threw ourselves at it, and we were not only kind of excited for that, we were very willing and open to anybody's suggestions, and that we were, luckily for us, that got us through that first trip.
How did the bar meeting tie into this? Because I missed that.
So sorry, that was because we're all based out of the UK for the most part. I'm originally from California. But I've kind of transferred over to England now, almost full time. And basically, how we got the start was the UK has some of the cheapest cars in the world. So, I mean, because being from the States, the fact that you could buy a car for $400 and have it run is kind of mind blowing. Usually if you can buy a car for $400, it's not going to run very long. Whereas in the UK, that's totally normal. Their market is ridiculous. You can get tons of cars for under $1,000. That'll work just fine for a couple of years. They won't be winning any beauty pageants, but they're perfectly functioning vehicles, and yeah, I think that's one of the reasons we were able to kind of get the start that we did. But yeah, we started off from London and did a big roundabout trip through Europe and then through Russia, Central Asia, and then shipped from Vladivostok over to Canada, and then from Canada all the way down to Ushuaia and in South America and back to Germany from there.
Is that a bit of a hack to go to the UK and buy a vehicle? Can a foreigner, anybody just show up and do that? If
you need to have a place to register it, so that's going to be your big, hurdle. But for the most part, for me, I was able to, because I'm lucky enough to have EU citizenship through. I also have a French passport. So basically, I was able to register and do that. I don't know if any American who just kind of shows up would be able to do it, but I do know people who have done it. The legalities of which I will not say is going to be perfect, but yeah, I know a lot of people who have done it. Basically, any European car, if you can get your hands on any European secondhand, little junker, you can take them out for pretty long wild rides.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because you're like the legalities, because one of my questions here was how many times have you broken the law?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's one of those as when you're buying, so actually here's a great story with that. And it kind of shows the relativity of like law and how it works and how it functions. So on this round the world trip, we had these a team of really young Belgian guys that were with us. None of them were older than 20. And when we got to Canada, they had all kind of scraped their savings together, and they decided they wanted to buy their own vehicle to expand our numbers and go down. And so they did. They bought a Subaru Forester. Worked fine for the most part. Had some pretty big breakdowns, but basically they made it all the way down to Mexico. And once you get into Mexico, like you basically you have the green light for pretty much every country south. And we just happened to be at a campground, and we were kind of sitting around the fireplace, and I was asking him, yeah, like, so how did you actually pull it off to do? Because I have no idea how you would buy a car in Canada. We had all kinds of problems with the insurance and stuff for our cars. So I was like, yeah, I never thought to ask you. He was like, oh, I just registered it at the Airbnb we were staying at when we were. And he was just like, yeah, no problem. I was, blew my mind a little bit. But granted, he made it through U.S. borders and customs. He made it out of Canada. Like there was no issues, and I'm sure the Airbnb people probably wouldn't have been happy if you had any big issues with it. But yeah, that didn't happen. Luckily for them. So, so there's legalities and there's wiggle room.
Legal disclaimer.
Yeah, exactly. Legal disclaimer. Yeah.
When you get into these, this is not legal professional advice. How long have you been with your fiance? I'll ask.
So we've been together for about 8 years now, and we met the first day of the round the world trip, really? And we've been together ever since. Yeah.
How did you meet?
So literally, it was Mac. So Becca, my fiance, and then Max, our now partner. He basically they bought the car together, and before I even met them, I met Andre, our Portuguese friend, who he also did the whole round the world trip with us. And he was kind of the one who dragged me into it. He was telling me, oh, I'm going to buy a Nissan Micra, which is a little Japanese car. He's like, I was going to buy it for $150 basically. And, he was trying to get me involved. And I was kind of like, I don't know if this sounds like a scam or what the deal is. But eventually, he gave my info to Max, and Max gave me a call and was like, yeah, it's not a scam. It's something we're legitimately trying for. So I went over it. I ended up actually flying to the UK and staying with him at his parents' house for about a week while we prepared for the trip. And day one we went and picked up Becca, and that was when we first met.
And is she from the UK?
Yeah. So she's
Okay.
English.
Okay.
So that's my staying in England.
Yeah, I would say the transformative trip of my life was backpacking in Europe. And one of the things I did that's one of my best memories was meeting 3 other random people, a Canadian and 2 guys from Portland, us renting a car together and taking a road trip after like sleeping outside the train station because there was like some festival going on and there was nowhere to stay except expensive hotels. And we ended up like going on this road trip together. And that was like 4 days, and just how fun it was to just be with like on a road trip with random people you just met. And then I'm extrapolating that amount out in my mind to like a year around the world. And that's just insane. On that trip, where was your life in that moment? Like, were you open to you're just like, hey, I'm just on an adventure and I'm going to see where it takes me? Or did you have to like leave stuff behind? Or
No,
what?
definitely that. I mean, we were, like I was saying earlier, we were all kind of in the right place at the right time, I think. So basically, Max and Becca had just finished university, and so they were kind of ready to go on, the stereotypical gap year for Europeans, which is pretty average thing. For me, I've been working seasonal jobs throughout the U.S. I worked in Yosemite National Park. I worked down in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. I worked in Park City in Utah. So I bounced around a lot. And I had saved up after working a couple consecutive seasons. I'd been planning on taking basically a year off of work and just kind of, doing a backpacking trip. And kind of discovered exactly what you discovered, in the sense of like, wow, it's really crazy to just meet up with these random strangers, but we all want to do the same thing. We're all, kind of in it for the adventure to see if it could be done, type deal. And when we finished the around the world trip, we kind of realized, wow, this was something that was really special. Obviously it meant a ton to us, and we were really invested into that. And so from that point, we decided, okay, well, we want to make a documentary with all the iPhone footage and GoPro footage that we had put together, which was also kind of a foolish venture because, it just took ages and we had no idea what we were doing, but managed to pull it off and get it onto Amazon. And then the other part of it was we wanted to see if we could recreate it. So about a year later, in May, May 2018, we wanted to see if we could get the magic back, of kind of just getting a random crew of people together and just going somewhere. So we devised this trip to basically drive around the Black Sea, and put the feelers out there on our Facebook page and stuff like that. And it worked. We got the, same kind of crazy people. It was absolute chaos and total mayhem. And that's when we ended up doming, once a year. We try to do a trip we call Mayhem now. And yeah, the magic was back, and we just had the most amazing time. And after that, we were like, okay, we've got something here that's really, really special and frankly kind of addicting. And so we just carried on, and we did trip after trip after trip. And the bus trip, the Pan American trip, was our 11th venture.
Yeah, that's insane.
That we did.
So when did the greater mission of Global Convoy and kind of building it as a community and kind of like sharing it and, rather than just doing the challenge and keeping it amongst yourselves, making it more of like a public thing where you could then, kind of put it out there, invite people in to be a part of it, like you guys ended up doing. Was that on the first trip? Did that happen, or was it after the documentary?
Yeah, kind of. It was always kind of, so I mean, like, the name was never supposed to stick. It was always kind of a placeholder until we found something better, and then we just kind of forgot. But yeah, I mean, we were always about the community. We're not doing it because we're grand explorers and we're really tough and we know what we're doing. No, we're total bumbling idiots half the time, and we're just lucky that the people that we meet along the way are the ones that kind of give us the ability to do these kinds of trips. And of course, you have different people who have different skill sets, and some people can cook, some people can clean, some people have the ability to fix cars, all kinds of different stuff. And so the community aspect of it was always really important to us, and it was just reinforced when we did our second trip, where it was just like, okay, we're nothing without our community. So, we have to be able to keep that alive and because we rely on them entirely to be able to do the trips. And the other big thing about that as well was, as we refined over the years and figured out was, the way to make it affordable for everybody was basically through community funding. So everybody, we find one place, one idea, one person driving in a car, across the U.S. is going to cost them a fortune, whereas 5 people going across the U.S., so, sharing the fuel, suddenly it's not all that expensive type thing. So yeah, that really, the community is what kind of allows for us to be able to afford and be able to get away with doing such ridiculous stuff.
I mean, look at what you guys have done just with strangers, for lack of a better term, like people that became friends or became close friends. But when a lot of them jumped on and joined you guys in your global convoy at various stages, they were either strangers or like hitchhikers you picked up or people you met on the internet that like kind of followed, but you were able to put something together that people could be a part of. I mean, I always think people are excited to be a part of something, and anybody listening, like you could be that person creating that environment. It doesn't have to be like the same vibe, and you don't have to do it in like $100 car and, go through all that. I mean, this looks a lot of different ways, I think, for people, but I just kind of wanted to pull that out because I think it's super valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is one of those I used to, it's really interesting. I feel like there's a weird split now where people really want to separate solo travel and group travel. And I don't know if that's really necessary, because it's like everybody kind of starts off as a solo traveler for the most part, or they'll eventually have to travel on their own at some point in time. So, it's great to be a solo traveler. You learn a lot about yourself. You get to kind of get out of your own shoes, get out of your hometown, and kind of look back at your life and see what it is that you want to do with it. But then, it's meeting the other people on the road and out and about, whether it's backpacking or whatever, that, really kind of show you what opportunities are really out there. And that's a big thing for us with, our community is so cool and, we're not closed. We're really happy to be open to everybody, but it's crazy. Some of the people we'll meet, that we never heard of before, and they didn't hear about us, and we just kind of, we picked them up either hitchhiking or something like that. And then suddenly a year later, one of their friends, was talking to another one of their friends, and they signed up for another trip, or we just meet somebody in a bar that happens to know one of the people that came on a trip, years ago, and there was no connection there, something, it's just, it's awesome. It's an amazing global community to be a part of.
Having done 11 expeditions, would you call them?
Yeah, we call them expeditions just for lack of better words, but I mean that's technically right.
Well, I think this is an important muscle to build, and that's the one of trust, that when you get into something, it's going to get figured out, even if all the answers aren't quite so clear. Just the school bus one. Let's talk about the recent one, taking the school bus down the Pan American Highway all the way to the southern tip of South America from Alaska, which is what you guys did. You could just all of a sudden start picturing an infinite number of challenges, right? Like small village, school bus, where am I going to park? Who's going to, where's this thing going to go? Are we going to get right? All this stuff.
The way the whole bus kind of started was, of course, on these trips, we always like to spitball different, ridiculous ideas of crazy things that we could try and pull off. And the school bus idea had been around for a while, but I was pretty negative with it because, I feel like the U.S. we're pretty crazy as far as like, certain rules and regulations go. And I was never driven something that like a 40-foot bus and there, there's all these, I don't even know the legalities of like turning it into an RV and like all this other kinds of, paperwork and stuff. And then on top of that, I was thinking like, well, where are we going to convert it? Because I don't really have any place. I don't have a shop back in the States. I don't know anybody who has a shop big enough to work on a bus. Borrowing all somebody's tools and stuff. It's a big ask. And basically, long story short, we ended up doing this trip to Morocco. And there was a guy whose name is Nick from Minnesota that came on this trip. And we're sitting around the fire talking about this. And I'm kind of shooting it down. I'm just like, yeah, we need a shop. We need the tools. We need all this kind of stuff. And he's like, well, I got all those. About a year later, after talking and negotiating, Nick had bought the bus, and then I bought the tickets to fly out to Minnesota, and we built it up in his dad's shop, and in about a month's time, which is a pretty quick turnover. But yeah, got geared it up for 15 people, We had his car following us as a little support car. It's a little Chevy Malibu, just to make sure, because we'd never driven a bus before, so we weren't sure what was gonna go wrong, and luckily for us that it worked out, because we lost the transmission. So yeah, it was a bit of a chaotic nightmare, but yeah, it all worked out in the end. We got it fixed up, and yeah, that basically was the way that the bus got started. And then once we were about halfway through the first trip, we were like, yeah, I think we can definitely do this.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense that your tagline on your documentary for the original documentary was "Around the World on Nothing But Optimism." There is something to that, though, because with any trip, any independent travel trip, there are probably going to be challenges, but especially something like this, right?
Yeah, 100%, and it's a lot of so for the people, especially coming on board, this was a much bigger risk than anything that we'd done before, and so we were making sure to kind of prepare them for that. So normally when I call, like, people say they want to join the trip, I'll call them up and ask them a few questions about themselves, and if just to make sure that they're kind of know what they're getting into. And I usually start that off by asking them if they've ever taken a shit outside before. And that kind of draws a nice line of, what kind of trip this is, they've actually, they're actually getting themselves into.
No need to sugarcoat it.
Yeah, exactly. Like right off the bat, it's kind of one of those, but yeah, the other big part of it was, the finances, because obviously, getting bigger vehicle means bigger inputs. And so it was one of those, we didn't really know how we could structure it properly so that everybody didn't have a huge amount of risk. And so basically what we did was we started off with one of our mayhems. We started off in May and basically made that a trip where we would drive to as many national parks as we could on the way to Vegas, basically from Chicago to Vegas. And everybody who came on that trip, we were like, okay, so what you're part of is you're part of the funding to make the bus happen. On top of that, like, you're the guinea pigs. So we're gonna try and do this, but on day one, like, the bus could explode, and we have a backup where we have like a secondary van we can get, and we can still do the trip, but it'll be very different. We'll be in a school bus, so just have to be blatantly honest that this is a big risk. You're taking a financial risk along with us, with a couple of total strangers. I'm not selling you crypto, but like, is that something that you're interested in, kind of type deal. And luckily for us, we had about 16 crazy people who were up for it, and unfortunately for them, on the third day is when the transmission blew, and it looked a lot like that exactly what we talked about was going to happen. But yeah, no, we ended up managing to get the transmission replaced for what we were about $3,000, I think, which was what we anticipated for the repairs. So luckily we didn't have to turn around and be like, hey, if you guys want this trip to keep going, we need more money, kind of thing, which would have been awful. But luckily, yeah, that didn't happen, and it all worked out. So yeah, you have to really, again, it's all about the community and the people that you have with you, and sometimes you have to rely on them a lot more than you want to.
You have this like sort of rotating cast of characters, all different types of people coming on a journey like this, which is what makes it such a beautiful thing. But I'm sure inevitably there are some like arguments or some tension, or maybe if somebody's, not working out, you might have to like confront somebody in an uncomfortable way, or ask I don't know if that's happened where you've had to ask somebody to leave the trip. Like, as a sort of the lead on this, how do you manage that?
So again, it's kind of setting expectations. So when I guess this is me kind of putting my, if I were to call it a business cap, I'd be putting a business cap on, but also kind of being, one of the leaders of these expeditions. It's very much in mine, Max, and Becca's charge to make sure that we're setting the proper expectations for everybody who's joining us, and what we're, trying to do. So that's outlining all the risks, making sure that they understand exactly what it is that they're going to get themselves into. My favorite one-liner for when I'm doing the phone call after, have you shit in the woods before, type thing is, the only three things I can guarantee you is that you're going to be cold, hungry, and tired. Other than that, I can't guarantee anything else for the trip.
Yeah, you have to like unsell it because you know.
Yeah, exactly. You can't sugarcoat it. And when it comes to people getting along, the fact is they won't. You have to walk into it understanding that people have conflict, and no matter how good of buds you are, like you're going to squabble over silly, stupid little things to super important big decisions, as of, what fork of the road you go down and so on and so forth. So it's one of those we try to, I try to explain to people, within our experience and over the years of having, fallouts and disagreements and things like that happen on trips. Luckily, never had any massive blowouts. Unfortunately, we have had to ask 2 different people to leave. It's never been under crazy circumstances, and luckily they were very understanding, and, we kind of came to an agreement, over time. But yeah, we explained to people, it's really important to take conflict head on. And when there's something that bothers you, if you sit and you let that fester for a long time, it's going to make it so much worse than if you were to just kind of be like, I'm grumpy about this, it really is a different dynamic. And normally this bus trip was really unique for us because we're all in the same vehicle all the time. Whereas all of our other, the reason we call ourselves convoys, because we're almost always a convoy of vehicles. So usually you can kind of avoid people for like a day if you want. Like you could pop into another car or something like that. You can swap out, which sometimes it's good to get that kind of, decompression and whatnot. But on this trip, we didn't have the opportunity. So that was another challenge. We had to kind of be like, look, it's really important that you're expressing your disagreements and your frustrations. And, these are people from all around the planet. So, we had Belgium, New Zealand, we had a girl from Singapore. Like, these are a lot of different cultures, a lot of different styles, of way of doing things. A lot of different levels of cleanliness is another really, really big one. So it's really important to kind of like be flexible and meet in the middle, as well as stick up for yourself, make sure you say, this is something that I'm not comfortable with, or I don't like the, whatever, I'd like you to use some more deodorant today, if you don't mind, please, kind of thing. Although I will say after about 2 weeks, all of our smells start to meld together, and that hasn't really been an issue. So,
are your cultures melding together too?
Yeah. And, again, like that's the other thing that, like I said, this is addicting, it really genuinely is. And that's the thing that I really love is, we get so many people from completely different cultures. And by the end, we all kind of, we've all kind of rubbed off on each other in a little different ways. Whenever I go back to the States, my friends, make fun of me because I use a lot of English words now. I love saying take the piss. Like that's like my favorite, but there's like every now and again I'll say bin because it's just easier. And, but if it slips out in the US, people will kind of, my friends will make fun of me. But then, the same thing happens with both Max and Becca. They're both very English, and I've rubbed off a lot of my American words on them. So that's one kind of example. But then, the same of kind of just understanding like where everybody's coming from and like again, levels of cleanliness. Like, some people will kind of learn a little bit more like, okay, maybe I should learn to clean up after myself a little bit more, or, maybe, or terms of praise, like, some things that can, I don't want to say like racist, but like not reflective of, global standards or something like that. There's a lot of weird key phrases that we have, in the English language, that are kind of, kind of weird and like just not really, I guess, representative of like global ideals. with the global standards, you just all kind of meld together and you start to see from other people's angles, and it's a real perspective changer, I should say.
Yeah. I wonder if I could use that on my wife. It'd be like, we're just operating under different levels of cleanliness, honey. I just gotta be.
Well, and that I'll be honest, that's one of the things on all of our trips, that unfortunately is a real pain in the ass is the, doing the dishes, because dishes always have to be done, and there's always people who don't want to do it. And so that's a conflict. Maybe if going back to the conflict, thing and conflict resolution, that's a persisting conflict. That's almost always there. And we played around with that. Like on the trip, we had like a rotor for a while. and then we didn't, and then went back to the rotor, and so it's not perfect. We work it out a lot as we go, and with different people we change it up.
Sure. And I mean, there's always a different dynamic with each group too as it evolves
100%.
over time.
Yeah.
But I mean, all these challenges you're discussing, whether it's intergroup dynamics or the logistical challenges and things like that, all of that's pretty much the point of doing something like this, right? Like if you want to be comfortable, you just stay in Bonsko and, have your high speed internet and go on your daily walk. You know what I mean? Like that, isn't that the...
There's plenty of pretty affordable cruise ships out there for sure. So it's, but yeah, no, the idea 100% is to get people out of their comfort zone and really push you to your limits, see what it is that you can do. I never all I knew when I got out of high school was that I really wanted to travel. I didn't know what kind of job that was going to get me in or how I could do it. And I just kind of fumbled around for a while. In my wildest dreams, I never thought that I would, be driving around the world with a bunch of, funny foreigners, having the time of my life, and all of that came because I, basically was just like, yeah, let's go. Let's try it. Let's see if it can be done. And again, that was kind of the idea with the bus was just like, we've never pushed it to this level. Let's see if it could be possible.
Yeah.
And luckily for us, it was.
I'm sure people are wondering, do you supplement this with, in terms of income and like practically speaking, how do you live this life? Yeah,
so it's very chaotic, and
you seem to thrive on chaos, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. In total honesty, it's not economically stable or viable in any way, so I wouldn't suggest this to anybody. We kind of it's kind of like stability. We don't have any stability really, and we're constantly bouncing around, and it's literally from one job to the next job to the next, which is can be frustrating at times. And again, we're really taking the risk out there to be like, okay, hopefully this will work out. I just turned 36 this year. So of course, I'm starting to think more and more about like, when am I going to get my shit together kind of thing. But slowly over time, it's building up. Like I now pay into the UK pension system. So at least hopefully maybe I'll have some kind of retirement in the future. I don't know. There's little things here and there that I'm working on, but, and again, being very brutally honest, the biggest thing, that we're very lucky for that allows us to afford this lifestyle is we don't really pay rent. We basically bum with families and friends, almost everywhere that we go. We are very lucky to, during COVID, we got stuck, me and this is just specifically me and Becca, but we got stuck with a family in lockdown, which we were very lucky for. It was great, but it was also a big, kind of a hit across the head of, well, we have no place to be stable. We have no place to base ourselves out of. And then we discovered, Bansko, working because my partner started working remotely at the time. And so did I. And we ended up coming out here, and we found a very affordable apartment, that was 27,000 euros, in a beautiful place that we really love in the mountains. And we were just like, well, we can be based out of here. Took all of our life savings. I had to borrow like $4,000 from my parents. Did that. That gave us a little bit of stability. But it's in Bulgaria. So that's very different from where the majority of our work and trips lead from and other, stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very chaotic, very, unstable, existence. For people who come on a lot of our trips, for example, there's a couple, that came on the inaugural trip for the bus, and they were only supposed to be on for that, portion of the trip. They basically came out, did that, left, realized they hadn't had enough of the bus, worked for like 2 months and making as much money as they possibly could, in the UK and, Canada, and then came back onto the bus and did the remainder of the trip. So they basically were on the bus for the vast majority of its adventure. So yeah, it's, there's all different weird and wonderful ways we figure out how to run away from the real world for as long as we can.
That's just living your life, man. I mean, I wouldn't say you're running away from anything. I think like these things, personally, I feel like these things always lead to another thing. It's just a different kind of life in a great way. I mean, at least you're preaching to the choir here with this audience, but
The converted.
being nomadic can actually be a lot cheaper than having a standard setup in a developed country like the States. Again, it's not for everybody. It's a different kind of life. And then you taking it to another level with some of these expeditions you're doing, not having a home base gives you a lot of flexibility as well. I mean, I know now you guys do, but it's a very affordable area. Let's talk about some of the people you met along the way on this last excursion, because it's so fresh. I'm just wondering if you could highlight, a couple people or share a couple stories that have made an impact on you where, I still feel like, I'm going to remember this person for the rest of my life. Either something they taught you or just like that they were cool or whatever. Yeah. Who's like popping to mind?
Kind of touching, just because we were just talking about, like travel and affordability and the nomadic lifestyle, like, how to make it something that's functional. You made me think about two different characters that we met along the way. One was in Central America and the other one was in South America Patagonia. And the first one we met, he was a really cool guy, very hip dude from Portland, Oregon. And he had this beater of an old pickup truck. He'd custom built a camper shell on the back of it. I mean, it looked custom. And I mean, that thing had lasted him, I think he'd been on the road for 7 years. I was talking to him about it. And he was doing a lot of writing online, but basically he was turtle traveling it. Like he was going super slow. Whereas we were blasted, we're going like, 4 hours a day, most days. We wouldn't stay anywhere for probably more than a week usually, max, usually on average, probably more 2-3 days or something like that. Whereas, this guy is really going low and slow the whole time. And, he's not spending any money on fuel. He's finding good setups. Like, he's cooking for himself. And so he literally basically lived throughout all of South and Central America for years, on a really meager budget. I think maybe like tops, like, sometimes in between $10 to $20 a day, which is crazy. And then the exact opposite, these people that we met in Patagonia, they had this massive, I don't know if you've ever seen any of these massive overlanding rigs that some families will buy. And I mean, like, some of them are like bulletproof. They're like ridiculous. Like they have, huge tractor trailer tires on, big knobby tires for like mudding. And they're just basically old military vehicles that have just been transferred into these, essentially an RV, just a really jacked RV. And, some of these things can cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Really crazy. But, and this guy was no exception. Like his, I think we were talking about, he said it cost him about 60 to 80 grand or something like that. But his kids had just finished, school, and him and his wife were kind of retiring, and they had their pension plan set up. They sold their house, built this rig, and they were same thing, low and slow. They were just kind of finding a good spot that they liked, setting up there for a little while, and then kind of living after that. And, while we're driving, blasting through fuel and whatnot, they're spending probably a fraction of what we were spending to go from place to place, so it really is just all kind of, those two people really stuck out in my mind as far as like, wow, okay, like this is just a totally different style of travel, and, they're rocking it the way that works for them, and doing it exactly how they want to do it. Which I thought was really, really epic.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the core values here, like traveling on your terms. And there's so many ways to do it. And I do love when you meet those people they're just out there living. You're not like, it's not like everybody's on YouTube or everybody's putting themselves out there in that way. There's just so many people to learn from out there doing it in different ways. I mean, that was the genesis of this show, because I always got obsessed with talking to these people, and then I'm like, why don't we share these conversations? In terms of like locals, can you think of a couple people you've met or some stories you want to share with some of the people you met in the places you visited? Yeah.
So I want to bring up the kind of overlanding community, and just to define it in case listeners don't know what overlanding is. Essentially, overlanding is just any way whether it's by foot or by car or by bike, anything that's not flying really. But within the overlanding community, there's a couple of different sects. Like motorcyclists is a huge one. The motorcycling community is absolutely massive. It's worldwide. And we're really lucky that we get to kind of abuse their hospitality from time to time. We just happened to get connected with a gentleman in Mexico who was just kind of an old school biker. He'd done all the states, actually driven up to Alaska himself, came back down, did all South America, and he's just got a little spot out not too far from Oaxaca area. And basically he contacted us and was like, hey, if you guys are coming through here, you're more than welcome to say, I got a plot of land. Like, you can park the bus up. And so we were just like, yeah, we're always down to meet other overlanders and go out, and especially, locals of the area. And so we went out there and he had a really cool, house that was set up at a big yard for camping, out like separate toilets, a little cabin that if we wanted to sleep in, we could have. And we were like, wow, this is like really built up. Like, this is something we're kind of thinking, oh, maybe it's more of a campsite. So we're asking him, like, oh, how much can we give you for it? And he was like, no, this is all like, if you want to donate something, you can donate something to building it. But he's like, this is just for other overlanders. Like, anybody who's coming through that wants to stay, is welcome. Like, he was, and yeah, he just had this awesome, he was there for other travelers to go through, and he was a little bit of an older gentleman. I think he was in his early 60s, and obviously had met a lot of awesome people, and they passed, all their generosity on to him, and he was just passing that on to us, and took us out for breakfast, the best breakfast we had in all of Mexico the next morning, and just, we exchanged patches, which was super cool. And yeah, I mean, those kinds of people are just like, they make it.
Yeah, there's something special about the people that have kind of, it's like they've had that amazing experience that you just described, or something like that given to them as a traveler, and then they go out of their way to, when they're settled down somewhere, provide that for other travelers, or some version of that, I guess, which is like a very wonderful thing. The destinations themselves, I know you guys were going pretty fast, but I feel like it's easy to think like everything's been discovered and, there's just tourists everywhere. We know there's not. We know there's a lot of small towns and in between places, if you want to call them, especially when you're overlanding, you're able to hit those because you can just pull over and stop, road tripping or whatever. Are there some places like that you kind of, pass through that you were like, wow, this is special? Like, how do more people know? Maybe you don't want to reveal them here, but I'm just curious if you want to share a couple.
I'll just totally butcher the names for sure. Yeah, I think so to kind of over elaborate, like what the way that we chose our route, was basically when we were doing the research for the Pan American, we couldn't find any other buses that had done this. So one of our goals was to be the first bus, to go from Prudhoe Bay down to Ushuaia, which to our knowledge, we are the only ones who've managed to accomplish that. Yeah,
American school bus, like the big yellow monster,
full 40-foot. Yeah. Has the stop sign, all of it. But yeah, so we're obviously doing a lot of research into the different routes, because Pan American is pretty big. It doesn't necessarily only follow one road, on a lot of different countries. It can kind of split up a bit. And I stumbled across this, old documentary, from a guy named, Sullivan C. Richardson. And basically him and three other guys back in 1938, drove from Detroit, all the way down to the Magellan Strait. In like a Plymouth, something like that. And I just thought it was really cool, and watched this really old timey, like documentary where it's, the guy's just being like, that's the Pan American, kind of, that style of
the old timey voiceover.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so good. But yeah, they published their map of the route that they did. And so I was like, this would be really cool to follow it, on top of the fact that they have all this footage of all these different places. One example of which is a place in Mexico called Monte Alban. And they went there, back in basically just, I think it was 1940 was when they hit it, maybe 1939. But they have this really cool shot of the Temple of Monte Alban, and their car just kind of driving around it, just literally just driving around the temple. And so I was kind of like, it'd be really cool if we could try and recreate that shot. And so we get there, and we hired a guide to, take us around and show it, tell us the history of the place. And I showed him a picture of where that shot was taken. He was like, oh yeah, it's just up there. And it took us up to the exact same spot. So now we have a really cool overlay picture of, this old timey footage, this black and white, going around the Mount Alban temple in their car to now what is a UNESCO site. And of course, there's no way you can drive around the temple. It's not happening. But it comes into kind of modern day, and you can see what little bits of the temple they've excavated now, like where, the same mountain range in the background. And I was really proud of that. But it just kind of, for the whole journey, as far as places we went, we had this really great map and a cool reference to what has changed so drastically on this road that when they did it didn't even exist, and now that we're going, now that we're on it, it's got 5 lanes in some places. So, a bit of a juxtaposition. And it was really, I was talking with a lot of locals along the way, and it's really interesting what the Pan American means to them, because it's so different, right? It can be such a double-edged sword in so many different ways. When I'm talking to Canadians, they call it the Alaskan Highway. They don't even call it the Pan American Highway, and a lot of the people I was speaking with, they don't even reference the fact that it connects them to Panama, which is really wild. And then when I'm speaking to some of the guides, in like Mount Alban, for example, asking them what it means to them, they have a really different, meaning to it, because of course it brings them, economy, and it brings, they're tour guides. So that's kind of their job. They want to have the people there, but it also brings quite drastic change, change in the landscape, more tourists are coming. So they want to build more roads, they lose more forests. Like it's, so it really truly is a double-edged sword. As far as a lot of the places go, that we were in. As far as like places that were really, special to us, was really amazing, I'd probably say the ones that blew me away the most, that I never heard of, were in Peru. We found kind of like a deserty equivalent to, Machu Picchu, where it's an ancient pyramid that was built before, the Egyptian pyramids, but apparently it's the oldest one that they know of so far. And what's going to kill me, because I'm not remembering the name now. But it's on the coast. It's on the coast in the northern, near the Peruvian Ocean. It's just a really incredible location that is just starting to get some funding to excavate. But it's wild. Like you walk around some of these old temples, and they have tons of tombs around. And you can peek in, and the bones are still there, and there's no like little rope around it or anything. It's just kind of like, yeah, the ticket that you buy just goes to funding to make sure that everybody can kind of keep it clean and make sure the sand doesn't take it back over, and it's not necessarily unique. There's quite a few of those out in northern Peru, but yeah, it's gonna kill me. I'm gonna have to ask you to.
Yeah, we'll ask you to send afterwards. Send the link to this documentary you're referring to.
Because I don't want to butcher the name, and I can't remember.
That's okay. So then people will be able to put it out there for them.
Yeah, my apologies.
No worries. Great. That sounds like a fantastic find.
Yeah,
I love the idea of that you used this 1940s or whatever documentary to kind of build some of your trip around. As opposed to, you're like, well, whatever, Google Earth, like, who cares? Let's go back. You know what I mean? And I just think that idea is a good way to reveal some different places to visit for anybody listening, right? Like, instead of going to the sort of the blogs or the standard places where you can find, the top X destinations that are on every list or whatever, find some obscure thing, and just see, if you hunt around, there's so much stuff out there now. And I just think it's a really interesting way to kind of discover a different place to visit.
You were saying, like so many places are kind of discovered, and it's, that's one thing that, especially kind of having this documentary to kind of look back on, it's really fascinating to see the places that, are discovered that were crazy destinations and then were completely forgotten. And those are all around the world. I mean, we even have them in the US, like Southern California is right full of them. There's tons of places that we used to be huge vacations destinations, and now they're just like abandoned, empty deserts. Route 66 is a great example. And not so much maybe for Americans, but in like for Europeans and especially the English, like Route 66 is like the coolest thing on planet Earth. Like it's like the most American thing out there. And I mean, there's always going to be really popular places, and you shouldn't not want to travel there, for it. But then, again, if you want to get out and go to the lesser seen locales, nothing wrong with that at the same time.
One of the things you said on IMDb for the original documentary was, years from now, when academics intone about the DIY backlash to a modern society drowning in tech, then this film will be cited. And I was thinking about, what you were just describing in terms of like the inspiration from this old documentary and comparing that to the modern digital world. I get the sense from the community that you guys are heading up is that there's an awareness around sort of technology usage. I don't know how that is for when you're on these trips, but at the same time, the first documentary, I know you guys just did it with your iPhones or whatever, but there's this documenting it. There's this use of technology, staying off of it. Do you guys have like any, I don't want to say policies, because you guys are just like a group of cool people on an awesome trip together and an adventure. But I mean, just for you personally, like what's your relationship with technology when you're traveling?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a mixed bag. Like we've actually come up with this idea, and someone's, please feel free to steal it. Just invite us on if you ever do it. But I love the idea of trying to do one where everybody has to turn their phone in, or at least take their SIM card out or something like that, before the trip starts, and then, get like maps and a compass or something like that and try and go across the US or across Europe or something like that. I mean, it's, we've seen drastic change ourselves. When we did the round the world trip, that was in 2016. And at the time we were doing that, the iPhones that we had are pretty barbaric to what is out today. I have an iPhone 14. We did a lot of filming for the bus trip on that, just because that's what I had in my pocket, and the quality on that is ridiculous. I can get 4K, like it's I can, slow-mo, like it's nuts what quality you can kind of get now with the technology that you have, whereas what was there before, didn't really exist. And then another big one is connection. Like data was so expensive back then, and actually really hard to come by. Most phone SIMs didn't necessarily include data. We were swapping out phone SIMs basically every border we hit. This last trip, I had an eSIM the whole time, and I had I jumped around between a few different carriers, but like I had Google Fiber for a little while, and that that worked pretty great for a lot of places. But then there's also regions that we went to, like Yukon. Yukon, we drove for 5 days. We didn't even touch a tower. So it's kind of all over the place. To answer your question, we really have no jurisdiction over what people do with their phones and their connectivity. But it is one of those that it's interesting to see how much it's changed and how much it changes travel as well. Especially for us, we used to have maps and have atlases and stuff like that. We still do. Like I like to have a backup on stuff. But I mean, I just download everything off of Google Maps. We use iOverlander, which is a huge place for camping and wild camping. There's so many apps out there now for all the different campsites around the world. That's just insane. And I honestly, that's in a bit of a sad way to me. It's made things a little more or a little less spontaneous in the sense that like, oh, we'll just rock up and figure it out. But then at the same time, it's made us a lot more confident and a little more stress-free to be able to be like, yeah, there's like 3 different campsites here. One of them will work, So again, yeah, I'd say it's probably kind of a double-edged sword, really. Like you win some, you lose some type thing.
Well, in terms of values, like your own personal values, what is the value that stands out for you in terms of your personal experience on these trips? Like, let's say you value serendipity or spontaneity or the community, of course. I mean, what's the thing that drives you to keep doing this? Because you have 11 of these under your belt. It seems like I don't know, do you want to do more? I don't even know if that's, what's the thing that keeps bringing you back?
The double-decker bus has already come up a few times, so.
Yeah. Well, I can talk to you about that because I spent 3 years driving a double-decker bus around the USA.
All right, here we go. See, it's all about the connections, man. Here we go. All right, this is how it starts.
If you want to talk about a real nightmare.
Oh man, are we gonna have to build you a podcast booth in the back of this bus? Go around?
Our double-decker bus had a DJ booth on the top deck, so that's another story. But yeah.
All right. Yeah. No. Yeah, man. I think as far as like what kind of pushes myself personally, that would be a totally different question for Max and Becca. So I don't want to speak for them, but I think for me, honestly, it's there's a really great moment where it was just me and Max, and we went we were in it was Panama, I think. Oh no, not Panama. It was Nicaragua. We were in Nicaragua, and we got invited to we stayed at a weird kind of a pseudo dodgy hotel, but it was cheap and everything was seemed fine, so we were kind of happy with that. We went out to go try and find a little corner shop that sold some beers, and ended up getting invited to kind of a local drinking sesh that was there, where they gave brought out a lot of like local hooch and other bits in there, and basically showed off all their cars, and although our Spanish is terrible and they didn't speak any English whatsoever, we still through a lot of miming still managed to just have a really cool night, kind of connecting with people with a completely different lifestyle and a completely different culture than our own, it's I really struggle to describe the feeling of that, like because it's just really amazing. It's also very privileged on my end, to be able to leave my life and go visit theirs. But it's one of those that I just can't seem to get enough of. That and food. Food is probably like 60% of the reason why I go everywhere. Just to try, all the best, Mexicans got to be probably one of the best things hands down. I know that's probably a fighting statement for a lot of different places in the world. That's my home food, so I got to stick with it. But,
I'm right there with you. I don't get much good Mexican food in Norway, so that's what when I'm dreaming about food in other places, it's always the Mexican restaurant in Mexico, but almost even in like the US, the Tex-Mex vibe. I mean, that's fantastic.
I got you thinking about the double decker now, don't I?
Yeah, I was thinking about the double decker. I can definitely share some stories about the double decker. This is a difficult thing to answer, I know, so it's a bit of an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. We can't have like the sliding doors thing where we see our life one way and then another, and we could really understand how we would be in those different scenarios, personality wise. But, you have been on this track and have had all these amazing and challenging and wonderful and grueling experiences and everything else in between. How do you think that has shaped your personality and who you are today?
Oh, well, it's all, yeah, like you're saying, it's always hard to kind of look out on in, for your own self. But I hope that it's made me more inclusive and more understanding, and more patient, than anything. Especially seeing how, people look at one specific thing, from so many different angles. It's really impossible for us to generalize, if that makes any sense. I don't know. There's just so many different perspectives on everything in life that to believe that one is the only one that you can possibly have, I think is a little bit silly. And I think kind of meeting people from so many different perspectives has taught me that, or kind of shown me that that's seems to be the way that the world really works. I don't know. Yeah, I hope it's made me more inclusive and more of a patient person, but I don't really know if that's the case. It's definitely opened, my family up to be massive now. I'm very lucky and privileged to have friends that live all over the world. and some of them are people that, actually that's probably one of my favorite quotes, from a really good friend of ours, Luke, who's been on almost every single one of our, trips. He was saying, I've met people on these trips that I've known for 2 weeks that I feel closer to than some people, that I've known my whole life, type thing. And so, yeah, it's really gets I hate to just keep constantly bringing it back to community and everything, but yeah, like it's so, I'm very lucky to have, such an amazing community all around the planet that give me loads of support and allow me to bum on their couches all the time.
Is that the guy that said he would stay for 2 days and came for like 7 months or something? There was a guy, Lucas, I saw.
Yeah, no. That's a different Luke. Yeah. No, he was the Belgian who bought the car in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah, he was the legalese, legal, not legal car in Canada. Yeah.
I mean, I know you shared a bit of your experience, like kind of getting this base in Bulgaria and stuff like that. I'm just wondering for you, there comes times when you're traveling nomadically, in my experience, where, and it seems like a lot of guests, where, you do kind of play in your mind with like the idea of, okay, what if I wasn't like a nomad anymore? Should I keep doing this? And to make this a more of a universal question, this comes back to any advice you have to share about, maybe advice is the wrong word because I maybe struggle with this. I don't know.
I don't know if I feel qualified.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, just that idea of like, how do I know?
Give me another 30 years. I'll report back on.
Well, it's hard to know. Like there are very few people that, it's just they travel and that's all they do for their whole entire lives. And comes a point sometimes where people will change their lifestyle or they might, settle down. I'm using air quotes for lack of a better term, or just like, change up the lifestyle from nomadic to something else, whether that's like permanent base, semi-permanent, whatever. And that can be kind of, again, speaking from like a privileged standpoint, but for somebody that's already has the privilege to do that, you're still kind of self-assessing and you're like, well, what do I want to do next? And like, it can be hard to kind of figure out when to like sort of take a break, I guess, to avoid getting burned out or something.
For sure. And I think that's going to happen anyway. Like it's one of those, I feel like even on a 3-month backpacking trip, you're going to get burnt out, like my biggest thing, I don't know about you, please feel free to disagree. But for me, when I was, backpacking, especially through Europe, hitting loads of different hostels, the thing that tired me out the most was having to re-explain who I am and my whole life story, every other night, kind of thing, like every hostel that you go to. So I think burnout, unfortunately, just comes part of the territory. What you don't want to do is you don't want to absolutely decimate yourself. It's really important to stay somewhere for a little while if you can. If you find somewhere that you really like don't be in a rush to leave it. Again, it's one of those. It's rocking a hard place because like if you have the time, you don't have the money. If you don't have, if you don't have the money, you'll have the time. You have to figure out how you can swing it best for you. But, the way I got into this whole mess was through seasonal work.
Yeah. This whole mess.
And I really fell in love with that lifestyle. And that was a very, that was coming from a very reasonable, I was making good money. I always, usually always had my accommodation covered for. It depends on what kind of seasonal work you do, but there's all shapes and colors and all kinds of different stuff, all the way up to, being a coder and things like that. But yeah, the seasonal was just so great for me because I moved, every 4 to 6 months, I would change location and I would move to a different place. Usually I moved to one of the most beautiful places in the world, which I was very lucky for. But at the same time, anybody can sign up. Anybody can work in Yosemite National Park. Anybody can work in Yellowstone. There's a lot of ski resorts throughout Europe, or for our American listeners, New Zealand, Australia, a lot of different amazing places that you can, the visa is very easy to obtain and, you can be out there for 6 months to 2 years. I know some people who went out there and never came back, kind of type deal. So yeah, it's really important, I think, to just kind of take your own pulse and travel at your pace and don't do it because, everyone's like, oh, the nomadic lifestyle, nomadic lifestyle is made up. Everybody travels on the way that they want to. And the reason I think a lot of people especially a lot of the remote workers out here in Bansko and through a lot of communities that I know, working communities, they're mainly just going from place to place because all their friends are there. And a lot of them, they travel pretty slow. They'll try to find a place for winter season. They'll try and find a place for summer season. So it really varies. You don't have to be going someplace, every 2 weeks. Again, going back to, the two different guys I was talking about, low and slow, where, instead of blasting around and seeing, all these different countries in a really short packed amount of time, which again, nothing wrong with that. Like, I mean, that's what we do. And it's kind of the stereotypical to see, like, if you want to see like all Southeast Asia, something like that, then, go for it. But yeah, I mean, I don't feel like people should be afraid to stay somewhere for a little while and really get ingrained in their local culture and the area that they're in. Or even doing it not too far from home. Just changing cities is a huge dynamic. And that was when I first moved out of California, that was a really big thing for me, so it doesn't always have to be super drastic either, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I didn't bung that up too much.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, the seasonal work thing is, I don't want to say it's underutilized, but it depends on who you are and what you want, but it's something to think about because you can you can frame it however you want. You could say I'm a seasonal worker. You could say I'm a slow traveler because I only spend 4 months. Like whatever makes you feel comfortable lifestyle wise. But I do think it's one of those things where you got built-in place to stay, built-in income, new experiences. You get to check out a whole new place. It's a cool lifestyle. How many years did you do that for?
So I started my first year doing seasonal work was in 2011, 2012. And then I was doing that right up until 2016, when I, started my backpacking trip. And then, yeah, I mean, I've kind of continued that on in, different weird ways. But I mean, since I started traveling on the road, this is not my main job. This does not support me financially, at all. I mean, my first job, in the UK when I first moved over was roofing in the winter time. And I kept constantly I meet all these construction guys, in the UK, and they just be like, oh, where are you, hear my accent. They're like, where are you from? And I'm like, California. And they're like, ha, 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 why are you here? I'm like, yeah, that's crazy. And they're like, no, seriously, I need answers. Like, I need to understand. I would kill to, so it's what I just started doing every odd job that I could get my hands on. And it's just, still kind of winging it as it goes, but
I mean, it's like I can understand their sort of questioning because it's like, why would you leave California to do winter roofing in the UK? Like, are you crazy, Joel?
to be fair, it was a pretty crap job. Like, it was definitely not one of the top tens that I've had, but yeah, I've had other really amazing jobs in the UK since. So, and then I've also had work here in Bulgaria and in France and in Germany, and so I've bounced around doing lots of different stuff, and the world is moving more and more remote, so I've managed to pick up more and more remote jobs, and yeah, so as and when it goes. You don't need a career necessarily, but I don't know if that's advice I should give to people.
For somebody that's listening, that's they're open to making travel sustainable in that way by sort of finding work along the way or just being open, which I think is one of the best pieces of travel advice for anybody that wants to travel sort of endlessly or however long they want, is just like the more open minded you are about like what you are willing to do to keep traveling in terms of financially earning money to keep it going. I think obviously the more opportunities you're going to have. If you're just like, nope, I can only work remotely for a tech company as a, marketing rep or whatever, and that's all I'll do. Well, then like it might be hard to kind of, make it happen or it might never happen, but if you're like willing to do roofing in the winter in the UK, you're probably going to be always finding a way to earn money. And, there's a whole spectrum that people are comfortable with and to each their own. But since you have had so many sort of opportunities that you've found along the way, and now you mentioned working remotely and stuff like that, outside of what you're building in terms of like getting work with somebody or an entity or a company, kind of finding that stuff along the way, what's your best advice?
Well, I have to kind of go to my roots, and I would highly suggest, like, especially if you're just getting your start, like kind of adventuring out, I would highly suggest getting a seasonal gig somewhere. That's going to allow you to be, stay put for at least 3 to 4 months or so. And the reason why I would suggest that is because that'll give you, in my personal opinion, a lot of benefits. One, you can afford to be able to backpack before then and just travel like crazy, a lot of places in a really short amount of time, and basically blow through all of your cash, and you'll have a place to crash and remake money, save back up, which is great. It gives you a lot of room for error there. And then also that gives you a really great base. You're going to meet really cool people no matter where you go. You're probably going to make some lifelong friends doing whatever it is that you're going to do. And hopefully that will give you, access to a community that you can use as kind of a base. And, when I was working in Yosemite National Park, my favorite thing coming away from that, and, I haven't worked there for many years now, so it's definitely not the case anymore. But my favorite joke was, I always had an adult safety net, because no matter what I did, no matter how far I traveled or, if I went completely and totally broke, as long as I could belly crawl back into that park, I almost guaranteed would have, a job, a bed to sleep in, and food to eat. And for me, those are things that that's the only thing I'm scared of losing, right? In life is like, not having those specific details. But as long as I have that, behind my back, I'm set. And so yeah, I think getting any seasonal gig pretty much anywhere in the world, if you can manage to top that off, then great.
Any favorite resources for that?
Yeah. I mean, just if you go look into seasonal, so it really depends on where you're from, because unfortunately, visas are a thing, which is annoying. But one of the things I wish I'd known is how accessible so many different visas are. For the US specifically, you can there's Japan, there's Korea, there's Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and you can access those by just looking, work away, seasonal jobs in other countries. You just Google stuff like that. I can't think of any specific websites that kind of have access to everything. But if you just say, seasonal work for an American in, name a country, and just drop it in there, something will come up. And usually that will lead you to their government website, and then you can, start from there, and apply. And, yeah, it also doesn't have to be that way. I mean, if you're good with coding or you're great with podcasting, I know a couple of roaming podcasters, or, a couple of editors. I mean, there's so many different odd jobs that you can do. I just think having a good base, to be able to kind of center yourself back to every now and again, whether that's your home, or somewhere far away from your home, would be really helpful.
Yeah, cool. Is there anything that you wish other people knew about you that you feel like most people don't?
For me personally, I just want to hang out. I just want to, I just want to have a good time. For our group, as our kind of collective, I think we mostly just want to, we kind of want to spread the word of, what ridiculous travel can do for you, and how much it can really change your life for the better, and also change some of the lives of the people that you meet. And yeah, we just hope we get to meet you on the road one of these days. I guess that would probably be it.
Since you have a base in Bansko, Bulgaria, as we mentioned, which is a digital nomad hotspot, to say the least. I feel like there's a whole community there. Just for anybody that's listening, that's been curious about going there, or maybe going there for an extended period of time to be around other digital nomads, remote workers, travelers, things like that. Yeah. What's your best advice for them? Would you recommend it? How do you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. I love the community here. It's one of the reasons why, we ended up, moving here and being, trying to use it as a base, unfortunately, as infrequently as it is. But we love it because we just have a really great community of people. The first year we came in, we started, we joined up with one of the co-working communities that was here. And there's like 5 of them now. There's co-living, co-working Bansko, there's alt space Bansko, there's, Valentina Heights, co-working. There's so many different locations. So, these little communities are really great if you are a remote worker. But for us, I mean, we just now have a massive, we don't even belong to any of the co-workings anymore, but like we just have a massive collection of people, that are always traveling around the world. And we just, for some weird reason, tend to kind of revolve around this place and come back and basically swap stories about, everywhere else that we've been. One of the guys, I was just mountain biking this morning, and one of my buddies, that I was riding the trails with today, he's going on it's called a digital nomad cruise. That's going to Japan, from Vancouver to Japan. So, he's going to go do that and have a crazy time and be gone for like 6 months. And then he'll come back here and, we'll have a beer and talk about it. And so yeah, Bansko's good for that. Bansko's really good for that. So yeah, I cannot suggest it enough. It's really a fantastic place.
Cool. Thanks for your time today, man. Like, we'll link up to all the stuff. And
thank you, bud.
Do you have a quote you want to end on, or a last bit of advice, or a big takeaway you want to share, anything like that as we close out?
If anybody knows anything about double-decker buses, or wants to be a part of our documentary, actually probably more on point, or just wants to do an amazing adventure, we're making this documentary about the school bus. It's happening no matter what, and we're really lucky to have a couple of cool sponsors on board. But we're always looking to make it bigger and better. So if anybody wants to be involved, we're really, we'd love to chat with you, whether you're, editor or a producer or a distributor. We'd really appreciate that. And then, if none of the above, let's talk about a double-decker bus.
Okay. And that's best place to go. Contact you guys, just globalconvoy.com. Is that the...
Yeah, globalconvoy.com. We have, of course, we do all the social medias. I've actually we started recently, on TikTok. We were never really big into the TikTok scene. But basically I've been posting one TikTok a day, on the, bus journey, basically day by day as it kind of went. So if that's your thing, feel free to go over there, and you can message us through any and all of those apps. We have a couple of little Facebook communities, that we like to have for friends of ours and ex-convoy members who, are traveling out and about. Sometimes, if you need a place to crash, we love being able to share in between the community. So yeah, maybe join up to one of those. But yeah, globalconvoy.com is the easiest way to get in contact with us.
Cool.
For sure.
Joel, man, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure getting to know you a bit, and hope we can do it in person sometime for part 2.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, brother. Really appreciate it.
All right, buddy. Cheers.
Cheers.
There you have it. Special thanks to Joel for dropping by the show. Loved that conversation, and really loved the spirit behind that community that's out there exploring. If that sounds like a fun random adventure for you to go and meet up with all of them somewhere in the world, check them out. We linked up to everything in the show notes. Now, before I let you go, I want to leave you with a story from the community. I got an email the other day from Sonia. I want to say congrats to her. She said, Jason, been meaning to drop you a message for a while. Started listening to the pod about a year ago as our family of 4 was planning our 13-month round-the-world sabbatical. Your inspiring podcast was my companion throughout the planning process and helped me manage the crazy amounts of unexpected anxiety I encountered in the weeks before we left. I especially enjoy the diversity of guests you interview and topics you cover. Goes on to say, so now we find ourselves 5 months into our family adventure, still listening to the podcast, and thought you would find it amusing to know this week we're headed to Everest Base Camp, and your podcast is still in my ear. Goes on to say thanks for creating such a wonderful community. And of course, she invited all of us to follow along. They have an old school website over at 8bootsabroad.com. I thought that was cute because they're a family of 4. There you go. So huge congrats to her. Maybe we'll have her on the show to share some of her big lessons. And I think one thing that's worth noting is this line in the email where she said, it was referring to the podcast, that it was helping her manage the, quote, crazy amounts of unexpected anxiety I encountered in the weeks before we left, end quote. Now, whether it's this podcast or a book or a person in your life or something else, the idea that you might have crazy amounts of unexpected, as she said, anxiety before you leave is normal. So if it happens to you or it is happening to you, don't sweat it. you're not alone. That was one of the big reasons why I wanted to share this with you today, because you never know when this is hitting somebody's ears. And just keep that in mind. If you have some unexpected anxiety pop up, that doesn't mean you should cancel all your travel plans. Sometimes you just have to sit in it. And if you can find some support, like I said, if it's through a podcast or a book or whatever, find it somewhere, get that reinforcement you need to kind of keep pushing forward, and you'll be okay. You'll be all right. All right. I'll leave you with a quote now. I had to find a quote that was centered around community. Speaking of community, that is the driving force of this show. This is a community-powered show. It's why I've been doing it for so long, because of you. And if you want to get in touch, please do. I love to hear these stories, like Sonia shared hers. And this is honestly what keeps me going, getting these emails and just hearing from all you listening out there. It's the best. It's the best. If I wake up and I get an email from somebody listening to the show or somebody reaches out, it just makes my day. So anyway, thanks to everybody that has done that in the past. And if you haven't done it, I encourage you to get in touch. And, there's so much power in this community, in all communities, when you're getting like-minded people together, and you can that whole idea of a rising tide lifts all boats. And so I thought it would be good to share a quote centered around the power of community. This one's from Margaret Wheatley, who said, "There is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about." Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.